Hey there, Joy Beland coming at you. We have another episode of CMMC Explained, and this week I consider it to be a special treat because we have Dana Pickett with us. Now, Dana is the Chief Information Security Officer here at Edwards. Dana, say hello.
Hello, and thanks for the kind words, Joy. I appreciate it.
No problem. So Dana is shepherding our process internally at Edwards Performance Solutions as we prepare for our Level 3 assessment with DIBCAC, so that we can be formally given that stamp of approval for the C3PAO designation. I asked Dana to come in and talk with us because I mentioned in a previous video that in our internal preparation, we are walking through a series of data governance exercises and implementation of controls. So Dana, you wrote an excellent blog piece for us tying in data governance and CMMC that we're going to be sharing today. But I wanted to talk a little bit about that with you. First of all, what is important to know about data governance in general?
That's a great question, Joy. You know, it's amazing. Back to an earlier point you made, we felt because getting into the CMMC business that we needed to make sure that we had all our ducks in a row, okay? So one of the first things we looked at was, we have policies that talk a little bit about data classification, that talk about data retention, talk about ownership. But one of the mistakes that all companies make is they don't have an overarching methodology or concept that around how do you govern all of that stuff. And what that means is data governance really, in my mind, is a way to manage the availability, usability, and integrity of a company's data. And oh, by the way, the company's data is their number one asset, just like their people. Their people are an asset. So we put together a pretty extensive formal data governance policy that incorporates all the other principles, if you will, and we're using that within our environment today, and we're also using that as we talk to potential clients.
Mm-hmm. And those core principles is what you're talking about.
That's correct.
I know that the recognizing data is an asset is one of them. Talk to me about data classification and the importance.
It's interesting. One of the key things, and you hit on it, first and foremost, an organization has to recognize data as a key asset. And they have to do that before they jump into the data classification piece of it. And really what that means is, you need to go through some type of formal program where you look at the data that resides. Not only data that you hold internally for your own employees and contractors, but also the data that you hold for your customers. And you have to be able to classify that. And there's different levels of classification, whether you use restricted, confidential, public, whatever you come up with, you have to be able to put them in some type of category so that then you can then go through a process of figuring out who needs access to what and how you have to put security controls around that.
And I like that you speak to the fact that you can choose your own classifications that make sense for your type of business or the industry that you're in. When it comes to CMMC, you would want to include what would qualify as FCI or CUI in particular to be able to track that and scope it properly, I would think.
That's absolutely correct. And it's amazing. It's, having been a CISO or managing cybersecurity programs for 30 plus years, I can tell you, people never take the time to go through a formal data classification process. Now, companies are going to be forced to do so because you're right. You not only do you have to identify CUI information, you have to be able to prove that you have that information contained and restricted in an area where only the people that are authorized to access that information can access that information.
Exactly. Now, I know that you helped in developing the training for all of our staff so that everyone, and basically there is no such a thing as a staff member that doesn't handle data anymore, right? We all do business with computers, but all of our staff at Edwards had gone through the data classification training, the data governance training. Did you help out with that?
Yes, I did, and it's amazing. We went through our own internal CMMC Level 3 audit about a year ago because we wanted to see how we would be positioned for the formal audit that's coming later on this summer. And I will tell you, we identified some key things that we needed to beef up, make more formal, and the data governance piece was one of that. So I actually decided that it was my responsibility to drive that initiative as Edwards CISO and make sure that we had other people that had what I call skin in the game, whether it was our IT personnel, whether it was HR, whether it was legal, because all of these organizations have to be part of that larger program.
And internally, which of our, may I ask, because I know that this is a question that causes some confusion, which of our policy or policies did you tie the data governance to?
So it's kind of interesting. So I would tell you that data governance really ties to all of our policies. It ties to the data classification piece, the ownership piece, the retention piece. And let's not lose sight of the fact there's an important piece called life cycle management. I mean, data should have a life cycle management. Data comes into your organization, but when that data is no longer being used, you need to archive it. You need to get rid of it, because guess what? It's information within your organization. And if you have an external audit and they've discovered that information, I'm not implying that a company is hiding something by keeping that information, but it could lead to some type of a further assessment, if you will, that may take time, and your company would spend money on something that they don't need to do so.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that you could call that a scope creep. You didn't expect that all of a sudden it expands to include data that has been retained, that it is no longer used, no longer necessary, but nonetheless, because you have it, you have to protect it appropriately, right?
Correct.
So I think this has been so informative. Dana, as we're moving forward with CMMC internally and then working with all of our external clients, it's experience like yours where we have a high-level CISO working with all the different business units to make sure that our CMMC assessment here at Edwards is pulled off successfully without a hitch, is poised for ongoing improvement, is resourced appropriately. I know that you work with the stakeholders, our board, making sure that everyone's all on the same page so you have the support that you need. Is there any advice you want to give to our viewers before we want to sign off today?
Sure. I mean, again, don't let something as big as CMC, scare you. Don't let all the pieces that make up CMMC, whether it's data governance, whether it's, other policies, procedures that you have to have in place. Don't let that scare you, because my best advice would be to chunk it. And I don't use that very often, but, take little pieces, mature that piece of the program, and then move on to something else. Because if you try to boil the ocean, so to speak, you are going to spend money that you don't need to spend. And oh, by the way, worse than that, you're going to go back. We're going to get so far down the road and realize that you may not have gone down the right path, and now you're going to have to spend more money to do it correctly. So my biggest advice would be to take your time, reach out to experts in the field, which Edwards is one of those, and let us help you put together a program where you can spend a minimal amount of money in order to get a program to a point where it's mature enough for your industry, and then you can mature that later on down the road as you see fit.
Excellent advice. Dana, as always, your expertise is so welcome and wonderful, and I'm really honored to be working with you here at Edwards. Thank you for your time. So in follow-up to this, we'll be posting a blog, and we'll put the link in the comments for today's video. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out. We're here to help shepherd this process, because at Edwards and with CMMC, we are all in this together. Thanks, everybody.